Welcome, everybody. I think it's time to go ahead and get started. I'm sure we'll see some more folks joining us as we get started. But I'd like to welcome all of you who are online with us. My name is Dean Brooks. I'm the director of the Interagency Network for Education Emergencies. All of you are members, I'm sure, and very happy to see so many folks signing on for a really relevant, important topic for our work in education and emergencies. So today we have some distinguished field practitioners who are going to talk to us about teacher professional development in crisis contexts. And if you've seen on the webpage, we're going to be looking at specifically two important resources, and that is the training pack for primary school teachers in crisis contexts, which is a interagency developed tool and resource. Very excited to have that in our toolkit and to share that with INEE members. And the second resource that we'll spend some time talking about today is the INEE report, Where It's Needed Most, Quality Professional Development for Teachers. I just would like to remind folks so that we can hear clearly and make the most of this time, if you would please put your computer on mute. That will help with the sound quality. And so to get started, we're actually going to start with our first speaker today. And his name is James Laurie. James is the Senior Education Advisor working at Save the Children. He has more than 15 years of experience as a teacher research, policy advisor, and program manager, working in numerous conflict, post-conflict, and low-income locations. He played a leading role in the development of, in teacher professional development at Save the Children. He's on the steering committee of the International Task Force on Teachers for Education 2030. And he's also the co-editor of the INEE Guide, Where It's Needed Most, Quality Professional Development for All Teachers. And James is a very active member of INEE, as you can see by his work on this guide he helped put together for us. So I'm really happy to hand over the presentation to James. Welcome.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Dean, for the introduction. My name is James Laurie. I'm Senior Education Advisor at Save the Children. I'm going to talk to you about two things today. The first is Where It's Needed Most, Quality Professional Development for All Teachers. It's a guide that was produced by, or edited by, Mary Burns and myself. The guide came out in 2015, and I'll be talking about the 2016 updated summary section, and also talking about how many of these recommendations are being put into practice. So this guide is a bridge. It's a sort of bridge between research and practice. I'm a former teacher. I've worked in various locations, kind of conflict-affected locations, and I'm not a researcher, but we used a lot of research skills. We did literature reviews and various other things to put this thing together. So it's trying to make that bridge, a bridge that sometimes is a bit difficult to cross. So let's go to the next slide. We know that there is a global learning crisis. The figure we talk about at the moment is 250 million children who are primary school going age and are not learning to read, they're not learning to write, they're not learning basic mathematics. And at the heart of this is a teacher problem, or a teaching problem, possibly on various levels. We need more teachers who are qualified in classrooms. We need the quality of the work they do in classrooms to be of a good standard, and we need that to enable students, children, to develop skills in reading, in writing, in mathematics, so that they can learn student learning outcomes. Those three levels. So as this slide puts it, more qualified teachers are needed, more effective teaching is needed, and more qualified teachers teaching effectively in the most disadvantaged areas is urgently needed. And that's very much what this guide is about. It's about the kind of the crisis-affected, locations and the need for really good professional development in those locations, because it is in those locations where it is needed. Let us move forward. So the guide is not necessarily telling people what to help what skills the teachers need to learn. It's much more about how teachers learn. Now this little image kind of taken from a website, 80% of what is taught during training is forgotten. Now this is quite important because in our sector, the sort of humanitarian and development sector, for years, the workshop has been the sort of the key tool to help people improve their practice. Now we know workshops are important, it's a means of introducing a topic, but on their own they are insufficient, and we need far more support given to teachers over a longer period of time in order to help teachers embed that knowledge and that practice. So we need more of a blend and more of a balance. Now, 80% of what is taught during training is forgotten. Now imagine that the trainers lack confidence in the knowledge they're sharing. Now imagine that the teachers, let's say, in a crisis-affected location, don't necessarily wish to turn up, they're encouraged to turn up, possibly with a per diem. And imagine that the training lacks relevance. And then we can imagine that 80% of what is taught during training could become 85 or 90 or worse. So I think this is quite an important point to make at this point in time. It also brings me back to thinking about myself. I was a teacher for 5 years in London schools. And I'm thinking, how did I learn to teach? How did I develop my practice? And I was thinking, probably with 3 or 4 key things helped me. The first one is colleagues that I worked with, peers or line managers. I learned from them by watching them, by them helping me, by having professional conversations. I learned by doing it, by teaching every day and having people expect me to teach to a good standard every day. I also learned because I knew what good was. Good was clearly defined, good was measured, and I knew that if I did certain things and that they were clearly evident in my classroom practice, then I was rewarded for it. And it really helps when you know what good or very good is. So yeah, I want to kind of put that's sort of the context for this presentation. Let's carry on. So that brings us to the guide, the INEE guide. Let me tell you about kind of the story behind this guide. It first started in 2012. Mary Burns was presenting the WISE conference in Doha, and she said some stuff which I liked, and I went up to her and said, "Hi Mary, I'm James. I liked what you said." Now this was in November 2012. We then said, we need to do something about the state of teacher professional development in the world. Don't necessarily know what we could do, but how about a blog series to get started? So we wrote to INEE and said, hey, could we have a blog series? And they went, fine. And then we kind of we encouraged 20 or so people that we knew who were specialists in this sector from all corners of the earth to write a blog over a period of 3 months. Now these blogs were still available online. You can still find them now, I think. And under them is a series of comments. And I think we had about 300, in total about 300 comments. Maybe it was 200, I'm not sure. Anyway, that became a data set. It became the input of experts and a data set with which was analysed. That was linked to a literature review. And then we came up with 7 recommendations, which in 2015 was published, a 162-page full guide. A hard job getting that published, and we're very pleased with it. But what we produced more recently, early this year, we had a relatively quiet launch of the summary section of that guide, which is designed to be more user-friendly, more practical, something that people can access with ease. That's the aim of it. So that's the guide, but there is a caveat, and the caveat is this: we lacked empirical research. There is a real shortage of empirical research on teacher professional development and teacher performance in crisis-affected locations and indeed low-income locations. And so when we put this together, we used practitioner experience, we used researcher experience, we used experience from multiple contexts. But what we really lacked was hard empirical evidence from the locations where it's most needed. And so if there's one kind of call for action from this presentation, is to say we need to make sure that we have really good research programs in those locations linked to practice. So let's move on. Who is the guide for? What is the guide and who is it for? It's a guide for policymakers, practitioners, donors, teacher training colleges, NGOs, anyone working for and with teachers operating in low income and crisis affected locations. Now this guide links to, it's one part of quite a large infrastructure or ecosystem of different organizations doing various pieces of work trying to advance this really important issue. There are reviews at the moment. There's some quite good stuff coming out of Sussex. There was a 3IE report that came out last week, which had a section on teachers. There's various impact evaluation analyses taking place and being published. There's good data, not brilliant, it's good data. I mean, the data is not comprehensive, but it's pretty impressive from the UNESCO Institute of Statistics, which can help us plan our work with teachers better. Obviously, there's an INEE working group on standards. I can't remember the exact name of the working group, but they've got a subgroup on teachers. There's also the teacher motivation working group that is doing some important work on looking at teacher motivational issues. There's also the Teachers in Crisis Context working group. And there's also these webinars and other presentations where people are trying to communicate their experience, communicate their practice. And just a quick plug is that Mary Burns, the co-editor, is doing a webinar on the 12th of October on teacher motivation. That's with the Inter-America Teacher Network, which I think will be of interest to many of the people listening right now. So let's go to the 7 recommendations. What I'll do is I'll give a brief overview of each recommendation and then say some of the things that we're trying to do at the moment and some evidence of whether it's working or not. So the first one, focus on teachers as professionals, as learners, and as individuals. So teachers are professionals. Professionals need to be paid. They need to be paid consistently and fairly. They need good terms and conditions. They need to be given decent professional development to feel like professionals. And it's terrible when you see teachers and you speak to them and they clearly don't feel like professionals or wish to behave like professionals, possibly because they're not treated like professionals. Secondly, teachers need to be learners and be treated like in the same way that we would treat a student who has learning needs, and we need to be treating teachers along those lines. Obviously, it's from an andragogical perspective because it's about adult learning. And teachers are individuals, and we're talking about crisis-affected locations. And crisis-affected locations have teachers who've experienced certain things, and we need to be providing a professional development form in partnership with local organizations and local authorities that recognizes the experiences that they have had. So let me flick to the next slide. So some of those key points I think I've mentioned already. And these recommended actions, professionalize the teacher workforce, design teacher professional development systems that promote and accommodate teacher learning, offer crisis-specific teacher professional development. Some of the really simple things we're trying to do at the moment to save the children. When we work with teachers, we know the teachers' names. So these teachers are individuals and we know who they are. And we care about them and we track their progress from the beginning of our work with them to the end of our work with them. And I think a simple thing like knowing someone's name immediately humanizes a process. What we're trying to do is design programs that are bespoke to their needs, so that they are designed and tailor-made for the needs of the teachers with whom we're working. Develop, apply, measure, and institutionalize standards. One of the things that the guide explains is that there is no definition of quality internationally, but yet we use this word quality with relative ease in our sector. And there is a means to find a definition of quality, and that's through a competency framework or a standards framework, which many countries have. In my hard drive, I've got the competency framework called the standards framework of numerous countries. They do exist. Now, they're not always applied, they're not always institutionalized, but they often exist, and it's either in the form of a standards framework or a competency framework, or or something like a competency profile, which has often been made more accessible. But the key thing about these is they need to be applied and they need to be accepted and understood by teachers. And what they offer is a national or a local definition of quality. Now, while there'll be some consistencies across many locations, I think we recognise that there's some things that are specific to a location when you're defining what is quality teaching and learning. So some key points about developing, applying, measuring and institutionalised standards for teacher professional development. Teaching is a specialist skill that should be based on a set of qualifications governed by standards. Definitions of quality professional development in crisis-affected contexts remain elusive. And given this void, anyone or any organisation can claim to be delivering quality, and that is a concern. So some recommended actions. Define quality through such a mechanism. Implement and institutionalise this, and apply international standards of teacher quality for humanitarian or underserved locations. And the presentation that's following this, that Charlotte and Mary will deliver, is going to talk about a international humanitarian education and emergencies competency framework for teachers. So some of the work we're doing at the moment, we're taking national competency frameworks. We're taking national competency frameworks and we're trying to make them relevant to teachers in their context. And we're designing measurement tools that link to those competency frameworks. And we're designing kind of the intervention, the training, and we're framing it by the competency framework so it links to the locally relevant subject matter. Promote teacher collaboration. One of the things that we're seeing increasingly is that good practice often has a high degree of teacher collaboration involvement. And this is key. The other thing about teacher collaboration, it's often quite cheap, which is quite appealing to agencies who are implementing teacher professional development programs. So the guide places strong emphasis on teacher collaboration. So some key points. Successful teacher professional development is often grounded in teacher collaboration. Effective collaboration practice requires time and space and support from school leaders. Now this is really key. It does need facilitation. Particularly at first. And now communities of practice of teachers might develop, evolve and go off in their own direction, which is fantastic, but they do need some facilitation. And the last point there is low cost opportunities here. Some of the things we're doing, we're using teacher learning circles in many locations. We're using video peer-to-peer observation, which is one teacher videoing another teacher. And this is leading to some quite fabulous change in teachers' ability to self-reflect. Now, we've got only anecdotal evidence at the moment, but it's good anecdotal evidence, and we're excited about it. Now, we'll touch on video a bit later on in this presentation. But video in classrooms, I think, is increasingly valuable. People are concerned, does it disrupt learning? Yes, it does disrupt learning of children for the first time in our experience. The second and the third time, children get over it, and they don't worry about it so much from that point onwards. Ensure ongoing support. Now, the worst forms of teacher professional development that we see in our sector is episodic, reactionary. Hey, we've got some money. Let's do a one-week workshop in a couple of months. Let's find some teachers. Now, I wish this sort of thing didn't happen at all, but it does happen at times. We need to be doing the opposite of that. We need to be having programs of professional support designed for teachers, with local education authorities. It must not be episodic, and it needs to be multidimensional, in my view. You know, workshops are useful, training is useful, but you know, whether it's coaching or teacher collaboration or whatever. These sorts of things are really helpful to help teachers learn over a longer period of time, recognizing it's a learning trajectory, it's not an episode. So provide teachers with ongoing support. Support is especially important for new teachers, and maybe a mentoring process is necessary in that case. Support can involve face-to-face support, classroom observation, feedback, project-based learning, formative assessment and distance education. And coaching empowers teachers to enact a particular set of skills and strategies independently and with fidelity and quality. Some recommended actions on coaching, on mentoring, strengthening continuous teacher professional development systems. So that word continuous is obviously key. And strengthening instructional school leadership. Some of the things that we're working on at the moment, there's coaching videos, instructional coaching videos are being produced. We've got one in Tanzania at the moment. Instructional coaching packages, and also working with teacher trainers and coaches to develop this quite important skill set, which isn't necessarily a natural skill set, so that people can be coaches to teachers over a sustained period of time. Let's go to the fifth recommendation. Invest in teacher educators. Teacher trainers are essential. We want to work with teacher training colleges, we want to work with teacher resource centres, we want to work with the people who are situated in a location. It might be civil society, there might be government. But we want to be empowering, strengthening the institutions of the state so that we really do strengthen those systems. Now, teacher training colleges, wonderful to work with, can be traditional, can be resistant to change, yet absolutely critical for the development of a teaching workforce in a country. Oh, let me go back a slide, sorry. So we need to invest in high quality teacher educators and not neglect them, and not just presume unfairly that they can deliver a training package on somebody else's terms. So pre-service education systems are often weak in crisis-affected and low-income contexts for obvious reasons. And this leads to problems with recruitment, preparation, teacher support. And the skill sets required for a good teacher educator are similar to those of effective teachers, which is no surprise. So our recommended actions: recruit trainers with extensive teaching experience. You know, we often find that teacher trainers haven't been teachers, which is a bit astonishing. You wouldn't find someone who was training doctors hadn't been a doctor, but we do find it in the teaching profession, which is worrying, and I think we need to discourage that. But yeah, recruit people locally, work with them, provide a program of support alongside direct teacher training. These sorts of things, you know, are necessary in order to kind of improve teacher trainer capacity. The sixth recommendation: strengthen instructional leadership. Now, instructional leadership is the head teacher or the principal's role as the lead learner in the school, the person who takes direct action in improving teaching and learning in classrooms. So which is sort of exclusive of their role as a manager or in charge of the finances or anything like that. Now, when we work with head teachers, let's think about head teacher for a moment. Head teachers are the guardians of their school. They can encourage certain practices, or they can put up barriers to certain practices. So we need to work sensibly with them, because they can be the person or the individual who does amazing things to help their teachers improve, but they can also be the person who blocks practice. So we need to work with these individuals and work with them smartly and respectfully. So let's look at some recommended actions. Work with ministries of education to set and implement standards or competencies for head teachers or principals, promote head teacher to head teacher collaboration, and facilitate head teacher professional development. Let's move on in the interest of time. So finally, apply technology wisely. Technology is no panacea. Technology can help though. And I'm excited by the use of technology, but I recognize that it does not replace human-to-human connection. And many other pieces of a much larger ecosystem need to come into play. We can't solely rely on technology. Nevertheless, there are some things we know do. Audio learning has been proven to be successful. Promoting the use of video in classrooms has been good. Open education resources and great teacher development materials made available. I'm also quite excited about distance education courses, maybe done through a blended learning approach with some face-to-face and some distance education, online, offline. So I think there's definitely a role for technology, but it's not the sole answer. So, 7 recommendations, or you could call them design principles for teacher professional development work. It's a work in progress. We need, as I've mentioned before, we need more empirical evidence. And we're going to continue striving to improve the performance of teachers in classrooms through good quality teacher professional development in order to address that 250 million children who are not learning. So there we are. Thank you. Back to you, Dean.
Thanks so much, James. Really helpful, and I just want to say, just listening to what you said, I found it so interesting that one of the beautiful things about INEE and the network is practitioners and experts like yourself and Mary Burns could take this on and really create a tool and resource that was so inclusive and really relevant to the work that we do. And really capturing some key points and then taking it even further and working on the summary to make it even more accessible to those who are implementing programs in the field. And one thing that really stood out to me is the emphasis that comes through in the recommendations of in crisis and emergencies, the importance of building upon systems and strengthening systems. And the minimum standards for education in emergencies really makes that clear. And it's great to see that coming out and through the recommendations from where it's needed most. I'm just going to check, is there anybody online that would like to raise a question for James before we move on? Just looking on our chat list. Eunice is asking about guidelines for use of video for classroom practice. Is it best to have it in a coaching or one-to-one situation, or is it possible to use this in larger groups without shaming the teacher? I also see another question from Andrea from NRC. The INEE Minimum Standards Teaching and Learning Standard 2 states that teachers and other education personnel receive periodic, relevant, and structured training according to needs and circumstances. In light of the 7 recommendations, do you think that this formulation, with its emphasis on training, needs an upgrade? James, do you want to try and answer some of those questions?
Yeah, I will try to answer those questions. First one on coaching.
James, if you look in the chat channel, that's where I'm reading them from. So okay. they're long questions, I know.
That's okay. The coaching one. Coaching. Okay, I'll just talk about coaching guidance. Okay. The Teachers in Crisis Context Working Group are working on coaching materials at the moment. Mm-hmm. It's a new and evolving area of work. There's several, I think quite a lot of organizations have recognized the importance of this and are trying to find really practical tools that can be used across multiple locations to help develop the skill sets required of coaching, and also therefore identify all the problems that Eunice, I think it was Eunice, suggested or questioned in her question.
Yeah.
So we have, I know that within Save the Children, and sorry for plugging Save the Children, I don't mean to, it's just the examples I have available to me. We have a kind of a literacy coaching pack, which is hot off the press, used for internal only at the moment, and we also have another one for more pedagogical skill training. I mean, some of them can be shared potentially, but we haven't kind of proven that they work yet, but we're trying to make them work. And I know the Teachers in Crisis Context Group are doing similarly. The second question was about the language in the INEE minimum standards. I hold my hands up. I was part of the INEE minimum standards version 2. So I was part of the move from version 1 of the minimum standards to version 2 in 2010. I'm not sure that it depends how you interpret the word training. I would prefer to be talking about professional development consistently, but I think we can also use training and see it as synonymous with a wider body of work around supporting teachers over an extended period of time. So I'm not too worried about kind of the language in that sense. I mean, if there becomes an INEE minimum standards version 3, then I'd probably encourage us to be talking about professional learning or continuous professional development or something like that. But at the moment, I have no problem with the word being training, because I don't personally associate it just with workshop style, face-to-face kind of sessions. I think we can interpret it as being more than that.
Just to add to that discussion, for many of you, I'm sure you've seen on the website, we did do a survey. We are looking at the minimum standards and asking the questions similar to what Andrea raised. Is it time, for example, to look at a review of the standards? We're also talking about this with the Global Humanitarian Standards Partnership and all the other standards out there. We're all trying to work together and sync with this idea of revisions or updates. And so, you know, this is under discussion, and I think it's an important question. And really also want to say, James, I appreciate this emphasis on professional development. As a teacher myself, I've always felt that we have to be really careful sometimes around the term training, but I also understand why it's used quite often too. So, but yeah, thank you for raising that. We do have another question from Minna in Finland. Nice to see you here, Minna. I was actually in Finland last week visiting Finnish Church Aid and then their work there and learning about all the great work Finnish Church Aid is doing. But Minna's asking here, James, if you know of any resources specifically for vocational education, teacher training, and vocational teachers and professional development. And there's another follow-up question for Eunice to everyone. Does the guide address the question of remuneration or other incentives for teachers to participate in capacity building and professional development? You want to try and answer those, and then we're going to move on to our other speakers?
Yeah, I'll answer them quite briefly. Resources for vocational education. I don't actually. I know that I think there's a huge overlap in the process of learning for a professional, whether they're a professional in a vocational education centre or they're a professional kind of educator in a kind of more primary school teacher training college. I think there's a lot of overlap, but there's obviously some differences. I don't know much about that sector, so I'm not going to try and claim I do. The second one was that remuneration, pay? I didn't quite catch it.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, the guide doesn't touch that much on that issue. I think there are other INEE guides which we better resources to address that particular issue.
Yeah, we do have one on teacher compensation, which just trying to remember the full title, but something we can put up. We'll put a link up here in the chat. I
mean, it's a good question. It's a practical issue, and we often find it in many contexts. This issue of how do you cover a teacher's costs to ensure that they can attend some professional development sessions. I think local solutions have to be worked out in every context.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thanks so much, James. We'll come back to some questions, but we want to keep moving on. So I'm actually now, we're going to turn to some wonderful colleagues as well, and that would be Mary Tangleder and Charlotte Bergen. And I'm going to introduce both of them at the same time because they are going to be sharing in their presentation. So first of all, Mary Tangleder has also been an INEE member for quite a long time, and we actually met years ago in Kenya, and she's also working with us in our working groups. But Mary has over 15 years of experience in the education sector and is the former project director for the IRC University of Nairobi Partnership to establish a master's degree in education and emergencies. So a really interesting topic, which I was also lucky to have a visit to that program quite a few years back. Mary lives in Kenya currently, and she's working as a regional education advisor for Finnish Church Aid. And she continues to pursue her passion for creating meaningful learning opportunities that will disrupt, challenge, and transform individuals and communities. And no doubt Mary is doing that. Then I'd also like to introduce Charlotte. I see she's just turned her video on. Nice to see you, Charlotte. And Charlotte is an Education Emergencies Policy and Advocacy Advisor at Save the Children UK. She has been working closely with the Teachers in Crisis Context Working Group over the last 2 years on the design and implementation of the new training pack for primary school teachers in crisis contexts. Charlotte was a former teacher, and she just recently completed her master's degree here at Teachers College at Columbia University. That's where I first met Charlotte, and now we get to see her all the time because she's very active co-convener of INEE's Advocacy Working Group. And her specialties have been in refugee education, teacher professional development, and education and gender equality. So thank you so much, Mary and Charlotte. I will hand it over to you now.
Thanks so much, Dean, and to INEE for convening this webinar. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I'm Charlotte, very pleased to be here, and I'll be passing over to Mary Tangelder later in the presentation. And thanks to James as well for that first presentation. And I think a lot of the things he covered we're going to be picking up on as well as we talk about the Teachers in Crisis Context Working Group, which James referred to, and specifically this initiative, the Training for Primary School Teachers in Crisis Context. So it's very exciting to be able to share the initiative with everybody who's joined the webinar. And I feel like I should say that so many of you have been a part of this process over the last 2 years. So it's great to have so many people who've been involved on the webinar today. So just really quickly, a quick overview of what we're going to be covering and talking about today. We're going to just give a bit of the background and rationale for the working group and the training pack specifically. We're going to give a little insight into how the pack was developed in that process, and then look at what's involved and included in the training pack before moving on to some frequently asked questions and then discussion of next steps. So that's what we'll look at over the next few minutes. So I'm going to start us off by talking about the background and the rationale for this. And I think that James' presentation really set us up very well for that, really highlighting this crisis in teacher professional development, which the report so clearly highlighted, the guide rather. And I think that really gives us the kind of a clear idea of where the rationale for this working group came from, because ultimately, as I imagine everybody who's joined today is aware, there are such huge challenges facing teachers in crisis contexts. And in fact, the guide that James and Mary Burns worked on really calls for TPD to be redesigned and reconceptualized, and that very much ties into this particular project. I've highlighted a few of these challenges facing teachers on this slide. I feel like they're pretty inadequate, really, given that we know how big the challenges are, but they just highlight some of the barriers. So we've got this huge problem of teacher shortages, particularly qualified teachers and female teachers. We know that there are high rates of teacher attrition, partly due to the heavy workload, but also the low offered incentive pay. And we know there's a lack of common standardized teacher management policies and practices as well. And then very specifically to what we're talking about today, there's a real absence of standards for teacher training. Often training is ad hoc and short term and not the sustained model, that multi-layered model that James referred to. And we know there's also in crisis contexts often a lack of harmonization around planning and implementation between partners when it comes to training. And lastly, but by no means least, we also know that it's a very difficult teaching context, very complex learners and resourceful classrooms. And so given this picture, the working group really came about by several members of the EIE community really coming together with an appreciation that there was a need to recognise these challenges, but also to come together to find solutions together. And that was really the foundation of this a few years ago. And so if you could see on the next slide, the Teachers in Crisis Context working group was therefore born by this real need, and the objectives are to identify problem areas in teacher management and development in crisis contexts, and then to propose and provide open source solutions. And I think that's one of the reasons it's been such an exciting project, has been the very much collaborative interagency nature of this work. And you'll see on the slide the various logos of different organisations who've been involved, and many people have given a lot of time and energy to this, which has been really exciting. So a mixture of UN agencies, NGOs, Columbia University. And there's more details of that on the INEE website. And so this group came together originally as the Refugee Teacher Working Group, so apologies for any confusion. It has been renamed the Teachers in Crisis Context Working Group, acknowledging that many of the issues we associate with refugee teachers are actually, and many of the solutions would be applicable in broader contexts. And the first problem the group decided to look at was the lack of comprehensive quality training materials for initial teacher training in crisis contexts. And so the work began. And so that led to the creation of what were the materials that were launched a few months ago, the Training for Primary School Teachers in Crisis Contexts. And this is an open source set of teacher training materials for unqualified and underqualified teachers in crisis contexts. But it also can be used as a refresher for qualified teachers. So it's very flexible and can be used in different ways. And all of the materials are available on the INEE website, and we'll give links to that later on. So I'm very quickly now going to just really talk about the process and how the materials came to be developed. Well, it all began with a focus on the competency framework that James referred to, and the need to come together as different organisations and agencies and to put together what we see as the competency framework for teachers in crisis contexts. Now, I've just quickly on the slide here put the kind of outline of what that framework is, and you can find fuller detail of what the actual competencies are on the website. But just really quickly to look at the areas it covers. So these are the 5 key areas of expertise and skills that really teachers should be supported to develop in their role in crisis contexts. And so as you'll see, that we've got teachers' role and well-being as critical, and often given the time constraints and capacity constraints can be overlooked. And so that for us was a key part of this. Then the child protection, well-being and inclusion piece is obviously fundamental to this work. Thirdly, pedagogy, then curriculum planning, and lastly, subject knowledge. And these were the 5 key pieces of this kind of competency framework, and this formed the foundation for everything that was then developed. So once the working group members had put this framework together, we then began the design process. And this process was about an 18-month process, so many of you may have been asking where the materials are for a while now, that they're all ready and available. So if we look at how it was developed, it was a unique collaboration, very exciting to be a part of. It began, as I said, with those competencies, and then came the curriculum design phase last year, and that was led by Teachers College, Columbia University, under the guidance and expertise of Mary Mendenhall, and that was when I became involved in the project. I was very fortunate to be one of Mary's students involved. And a team of 11 students worked very closely with Mary and the Refugee Teacher Working Group, as it was then, in a very collaborative process where we were designing the modules, and these experts from all these different organisations were feeding in, reviewing and giving lots of fantastic feedback and advice. And I would say a real starting point for us was not only the literature around teacher training in the crisis context, but also existing resources, because we know there's a lot of great things out there, and this was an opportunity to bring those together. So again, a huge thanks to INEE and colleagues probably on this webinar who inputted into that process. Once we had the design ready, we then went into the field testing stage, and last summer we were fortunate to be able to field test in 2 locations. So one was Kakuma in Kenya, and the second in Damiz in Iraq. The Kenya pilot was led by UNHCR and Teachers College, and the Iraq pilot by IRC. And that process was invaluable. We learned so much for the materials during that process. They happened at similar times as well, so we were able to feed in directly and try out revisions in different locations. And given the different contexts, the learning was really huge. That was very exciting. And then at the same time, we also had a process of expert review from external experts who were kind enough to review all of the materials and provide expertise on the lines of conflict sensitivity, gender responsiveness. We had feedback from field implementers giving that eye of implementation, and teacher professional development experts. So we had a lot of input. And then we brought all of this learning together to do the final revision process last autumn, before going through the proofing and layout. So hopefully that gives a little bit of a sense of perhaps why it took 18 months, but also highlights that it really was a sort of uniquely collaborative process that engaged, sort of brought in so many different areas of expertise and brought everyone to work together on this open source resource. So before I hand over to Mary to talk about what the pack really involves, I thought people might like to hear a little bit about the guiding principles for the materials that we really use to guide us as we design them. And I've titled this guiding principles, but also lessons learned, because I think throughout that 18-month period, it really was a process of learning where we weren't doing these things that we intended to and where we should be doing more of it. So it's both our principles and the lessons we learned along the way. So The approach is very specific to crisis context, so of course a lot of this could be used in a much broader focus, I'm sure. But because of that, we very much wanted it to be gender and conflict sensitive. We wanted it to be low resource and low tech. And so you'll see from the materials that no technology is needed, such as you don't need PowerPoint, anything that could, there are PowerPoints available, but anything on a PowerPoint could be used on a flip chart, and there's very limited resources needed, so hopefully they can be used in any context. And they're also very flexible and adaptable. And again, that was something we understood would be very important in the context. And so there's a lot of guidance about how to adapt these and make them relevant depending on where you're working and what the needs are. We also wanted the content to be very relevant, and so it includes issues that we were aware of would be key in a lot of the context in which colleagues are working. So, for example, there are sessions on child protection, corporal punishment, gender-based violence, and also around psychosocial support and socio-emotional learning. We also wanted it to be very strategy focused and very tangible so that people can really, teachers felt that they could really have these takeaways from the training, but we wanted those strategies to be relevant. And in piloting, we learned a lot about making those relevant, and a teaching strategy that's appropriate for 30 students may not be appropriate for 140. And so that was a really again, why piloting was so valuable, making sure these strategies work in these large class sizes, these multilingual classrooms with multi-age learners. And we also wanted to find a way to bring in local expertise, and we'll talk about that a little later on in the presentation. So next then ties a little to what James was saying about the difficulty of translating what you learn in a training session into the classroom. And so we really tried to focus on changing practice through the material, particularly bearing in mind that a lot of the teachers we're working with haven't necessarily taught in that way before or been taught that way themselves. And so to do that, there's quite a focus on empathy in the materials, so really engaging the teachers in thinking about and reflecting on why the strategies are effective and why they may work, and asking the teachers to reflect on their own learning experiences and teaching experiences. Modelling is a feature throughout. You'll see this in the materials. The idea is the trainer is constantly modelling, teaching kind of the strategies and practice that the teachers can then replicate in the classroom. It's all very much a participatory, interactive pedagogy that then can be really effective for student learning, and is a lot of fun for the training. And it's a huge practice time, and again, a key learning from piloting that the more practice time, the better, and so factored into all of the training is a lot of practice time for the teachers so they can really have a go at these strategies and build their confidence before returning to the classroom. And then lastly, and something that, as I mentioned, was key for us, was this issue of supporting teachers was really important in these contexts. And so there's a real emphasis on well-being throughout, teacher well-being throughout, as well as child well-being throughout the materials, and on collaboration. And this is something, again, that ties into this idea that teacher development doesn't just happen in a training classroom, and so the materials do promote collaboration in the training, but also outside of the training, so between sessions and modules, but also after the training is finished, and that was really important for us. So these are the different principles and lessons that we really hope shaped the development of the materials, and hopefully you'll see that if you are currently using them or if you are keen to use them in the future, hopefully you'll see where we've been able to do those things. That's enough from me. I'm going to hand over to Mary Tengelder, who will tell us more about what is actually involved in the materials. So Mary, can you hear? Are you online now? We had trouble connecting.
Actually connecting in the phone because I'm not actually my internet is not dependable today, so it's going in and out. So hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. Okay, perfect. So I'll just start in with what is actually in the training pack. So thanks so much, Charlotte, for providing us with that overview. So I'll just get a bit more into the nitty-gritty. So you can see the slides with the same diagram that Charlotte introduced. So the training modules are structured exactly according to these competencies that, or this framework. So if we just go to the next slide, you can see that the modules are done in four different separate modules. They're designed as either a complete pack or as standalone modules. And the reason we did that is that we understood that agencies might want to pick and choose what it is that they actually need to use. They may want to do one module before another. They may only want to do one of them, or an agency might just want to pull out specific sessions in modules. So that's really part of the contextualization process that I'll talk a bit more about later. We also designed two versions of the pack. One is what we call an introductory training pack, which is the orange one to the left. And then we have what we call extended training. So the introductory training pack is an accelerated version of the longer one, and that's 23 hours in total of instruction. But the reason we designed that is we knew that even though we would like to have every teacher to have the opportunity to have a more in-depth training, that's not always possible. And some teachers may only be able to do a very accelerated version. So that's what the introductory pack is for, with the hope that they'll have more opportunities later to have a more in-depth training. And then there's the extended one. And the idea of the extended training is that there will be time in between modules for teachers to go to the classroom and apply what they've learned, test it out, and then come back to the second module and really you know, talk through the challenges they had and how that links to the next one. So that's how a bit about the structure of it. And you can see when you go onto the INEE website, you can see how it's all been separated out. So it's very easy to pull out different modules and even pull out different sessions there. And then as Charlotte mentioned, there's PowerPoint slides for each one of those sessions and modules, but very put together in a very simple way so that technology is not there. You can use flip charts or whatever's available. So I just want to give you a bit more detail as to what's in each of the modules. So if you look at the next slide, for the introductory pack is separated into 4 different modules. And you can see in the teacher's role and well-being, we get into, you know, what does it mean to be a teacher? How do you take care of yourself, particularly in a crisis setting? And what is the code of conduct for a teacher? And then we get into day 2 on child protection, well-being, and inclusion. And this, from what we've learned from the pilot, and we continue to see this as we roll out the training, is that this is a very hot topic for teachers and a real area of concern. And we get into also social and emotional learning, and then there's positive discipline, which again is something that's of real interest for teachers in this part of the world, in East Africa. And then we have day 3 and pedagogy. And that is really the how of teaching, how to be active and engaging, and the questioning strategies. And as Charlotte said, we really try to model this all throughout the training, and there's lots of detailed tips and sample questions for trainers to use throughout the training. And then the last day is about the actual application. So each teacher has the opportunity to sit down and make an action plan for how they're going to apply what they've learned in their classroom, to start to take a look at lesson planning and how to do that, and to assess what they've learned so far and what areas of that need further support. So that's the introductory pack, and the extended training on the next slide looks very similar, and but you can see that there are a few more details there. You can see, for example, under teacher's role and well-being, that we also have the topic on collaboration and communities of practice. Under child protection, well-being, and inclusion, we have a few more topics, such as seeking further support for children. Pedagogy, we dig a bit more into child development and differentiation. Curriculum planning, again, is similar to the ITP, but much more detailed. For example, we have making lessons relevant and meaningful for children. So hopefully that highlights the differences between the 2 packs. So the next slide, I'll get a little bit more into how are the sessions actually structured. So every session is structured exactly the same, so that the teachers become very familiar very quickly with the process. So the first part of each session is just to reflect on what they already know, so that we can draw upon participants' knowledge, and to review what they've done previously and talk about how that links and bridges to the next topic. And then we quickly get into what are the new materials, what's the new content, And there are lots of opportunities in the training for them to now start to apply what they've actually learned. Again, it's very hands-on, very participatory, and hopefully fun for the teachers. And the last part, planning, action, and assessment, is to, again, go back and take a look at how are they now going to apply this into their own classroom, and a self-assessment. There's a note there about a skills and strategies handout, so I just wanted to point out that there's a whole packet of handouts. So the trainer would hopefully not have to spend hours developing handouts for the training. It's all already there. So on that note, the next question is really about how do we contextualize this, and we talked a lot about the need for adaptability and flexibility. But even though we've developed a very detailed guide to hopefully make it easy for trainers, there does need to go through an extensive contextualization process to make it real for teachers and applicable. So the first thing that we recommend that a good needs assessment is conducted, and that would include doing school visits and observations to really note what the challenges are and the needs are, and then to consult with some key education stakeholders in the community about their perspectives on education needs and ways that they could support teacher professional development. And we've noted here the aspect of pre-work, and there's a picture here of people coming together to do some work. And that's really about sitting down with your training team and going through the sessions and crossing out what you don't think is maybe applicable, and adding, making notes, maybe adapting the language, but really spending time to dig into the materials ahead of time and making sure that it really addresses your group. Throughout the training pack, we've flagged different points that we think a guest speaker would be really useful. For example, in the session of child protection, it would be great to have a local child protection expert to come in to talk about the legal aspects, local referral systems, etc. And then we need notes that this is participant-centered. So even though the contextualization process happens before the training, it continues to happen throughout the training, where we really draw on participants' knowledge and expertise of the context. So many opportunities and many discussion questions we've included, where we ask teachers to really reflect on their situation and think about how this applies to their context and to draw from their experiences. So we really want to emphasize that teachers respected all the way throughout, that we listen closely and with an open heart to their concerns, that their, the skills that they want to bring forward and how they think this could be adapted. So hopefully that helps to understand how we see the contextualization process, and I'm sure there's many more pieces here that we haven't added, but that's just a few points. And then, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip right to the last part about frequently asked questions. So these are questions that have been put to us over the last few months, and we just want to highlight them here. We'll go through them. And the first one is, who can be a trainer? So we purposely designed this with the understanding that teacher trainers are not readily available in crisis contexts, and we want to make this as easy as possible for anybody to go forward and do the training. So we don't have a set list of requirements about who can be a trainer, but there's the understanding that it would hopefully be somebody who's an experienced educator, who's passionate about quality education, who is keen to learn and keen to do the work to adapt it to the context. But there are no set list of certificates that are required, et cetera. The second question is, are translations available? So some agencies have already moved forward on translating some modules into Spanish and Arabic and are moving ahead to hopefully translating the full pack. So we would ask that if you're interested in the translated version, just to contact us and we can put you in touch with those agencies. And then lastly, a frequent question we get is the training certified? And we understand that this is obviously a real concern for teachers, that they would like and need that certification for their ongoing recognition and professional development. However, getting this recognized by a higher education institution does take quite a bit of time. to go through that review process, etc. So it's not something that we have been able to do yet, but it's on for the working group, it's certainly on the agenda and something that we hope to address at some point in the future. And then finally, I'm sure there's many more questions, and we'll have time at the end, hopefully, just to get into your questions. And then finally, some tips about how you might want to introduce this to your agency. So things that have worked for us are, first of all, there's the obvious one, which is sending a link to the INEE website. And we're also developing a blog series of how different agencies are using it and adapting it, and challenges they've found, or successes they've had, etc. So we'd recommend setting those links. But we also know that people are buried under a mountain of emails and they may miss that. And so a great way to present this is to have a short presentation to your staff who has any stake in this, and to go through, exactly as we're doing today, some of the highlights and just to start a discussion of how you might be able to use it. And even to do maybe a short training where you can actually practice some of the sessions together is one way to also gain some interest. Another way to do this is to take a look at your annual planning and to identify points in the near future or farther down the road where this training may be able to take place. And finally, we would really emphasize that, to make the case that this is an interagency pack, the first of its kind. There's a real opportunity now to start to connect with other agencies and look at interagency trainings, and we've had some rich discussions here in the East Africa region about how some agencies could come together to do a co-training, so we could really get away from this sort of, disjointed one-off training that has, historically been happening, and that it's flexible and adaptable. And so where can you find the training pack? We've included the links here. I'm sure you've all read it in detail already, but if not, here are the links. And then I'll hand it back to Charlotte to talk about what's next.
Thanks so much, Mary. So we'll just finish off because I know we want to have some time for questions and answers, but just talking about what's next for the training pack and what's next for the working group. So it's been really exciting that lots of different organisations have started to use these materials, but we're really keen to make sure we learn from that process. So in terms of next for the pack, we would hope and encourage people to start using the materials, but in so doing we really want to learn as much as we can from that. And so you will find on the website that we have a feedback form, and it's not extensive, and any information we can get from you if you do use them would be fantastic, because that would really help us think about version 2. And revisions are very much on the mind, and we want to be able to learn and build from everything so far to update and revise the materials, and there are already ideas around that and what that would look like. So please do, if you can, give us as much feedback as possible. And as Mary mentioned, there's an upcoming blog series. So if anybody's using the materials or will be on the future, please do take part in the blog series on the INEE website. It's going to be a great opportunity to hear from each other and share experiences in teacher professional development. And as Mary also mentioned, there is a contact address on the website, so please do get in touch with us, checked regularly by the working group, and so we can be in touch if anyone has any questions or queries or ideas. Please do reach out. And then in terms of what's next for the working group, I had a quick look at some of the questions, and some of the things people have mentioned are definitely on the radar. So the first thing we've really focused on this year is this issue around teacher support and particularly coaching. So bearing in mind everything we heard from James and everyone's aware of, but the importance of kind of the in-school support beyond the training room, that's the next step. So those coaching materials are currently in development. We were able, in fact, to pilot a few of some of those materials in Kakuma this summer, which is exciting. So watch this space for that one. And we're also exploring other ideas. So just one example is some members of the group are looking at mobile teacher support as an example. And there have been other ideas around using technology as well and how that connects to the materials, and maybe some advocacy as well. And so lots of different ideas. The main focus at the moment is learning from the materials with the view to revisions, and then also exploring the coaching opportunities. So that's next steps, and hopefully that's given everybody an overview to the materials that will be useful going forward. And we'd love to hear from you as we move forward. And we would also love to hear any questions and answer as best we can. So thank you so much to everyone for listening, and I'll hand back to Dean.
Thank you so much, Mary and Charlotte, and really exciting. I actually have a question, first of all, for both of you, and it's a question from my side, and then we'll go to questions that I see have been posted. But I'm curious why we've called it primary teachers. When I'm seeing the themes that you're looking at, couldn't we use this in context with teachers working with older students, or is it really tailored only for teachers working with primary students?
Hi, Dean. I'll jump in. I think it's a great question, and actually one that has come up, particularly when we were in Kakuma. We had a lot of interest about using it at the secondary level. I think we focused on primary teachers at the beginning to give focus to the project, and also perhaps in recognition that at the secondary level, the subject knowledge piece really does become particularly, I mean, it's significant all along, but it perhaps becomes a little even more complex. But I think that actually a lot of what is in there in terms of context is completely applicable. So perhaps we should change the name, or I'd be very keen to make a secondary version, as I was a high school teacher. So I have mentioned it to the group, but I think it's a great point, and I would hate for anybody to be put off from using them. And as we say, they're so hopefully flexible and adaptable that I would definitely encourage people working with teachers of higher ages to take the materials and use anything that would be useful.
Okay, yeah, and I'd be interested if any members do that to be in touch with us so we could be sure to document that. I have put into the chat the link to our blogging tips, so if folks are using any of these materials, the Teacher Professional Development Guide, where it's needed most, or the teacher training pack, please do let us know. And I do want to also mention, I saw some questions on translations. Jonathan Penson, thanks for raising that point, so that NRC and Plan International are actually in the midst of translating into French, but it does look like we are needing some help on other languages. And I saw a question about Arabic, and I'm sure there must be some interest out there. So please do get in touch through email if you're interested in the translation question or in helping with the translations, because we don't want to duplicate. And INEE does have some protocols around translation, because we want to make sure that we are translating correctly and that everything's understandable. So please email us if this is something you're interested in. The email address is tpd@ineesite.org. We'll put that in the channel as well. Let's go to some questions. I have to skim up here. I remember seeing one from Nisreen more at the beginning of the presentation. Where did that go? Well, I pretty much remember it, but it's up here in the oh, here it is. So Nisreen from War Child Holland in Lebanon, she had a question about the competencies, and she was wondering if the sequential design of the 5 competency areas was done on purpose. Does one have to happen one before the other? Charlotte or Mary, do you want to answer that?
Sure, I can jump in. So it's another great question, and I guess the simple answer is no. We've made them so that they do stand alone, and so that you can use them in any order that is most appropriate for your teachers. And I think that was something we really realised during piloting. I think we did initially have an idea that it would be sequential, and had kind of developed it in that way as we thought it would be a good fit. But when we were piloting, we quickly realized that it very much would depend on the context. And actually in Kenya versus Iraq, we did them in a different order. So I think the way that we've made them has made it so that you can use them in the way you see fit, and it all will still make sense and work together.
Okay. And just to mention, Annie Wakesa is really excited about the coaching materials. She sent me a note and would love to see those. So I'm sure you're working on sharing those in the near future. But just to give you a little bit of push, people are eager to see the coaching materials. And then we have a question from Yehan Zeben. And his question is around the training of teachers. Where did it go? Okay, training of refugee teachers. And that is about related to the turnover of the teaching staff. and that could be due to legal or accommodation issues, and just the instability that teachers face. And maybe James, you might want to jump in on that as well, if anybody has some ideas around that question.
I'll dive in. It's not an easy question, the issue around teacher status for refugee teachers. We know it's a complicated issue. We know that teachers consistently find when they cross a border that their teaching qualification means far less than it did before they crossed the border. It's a concern. It's something that many people are grappling with, and I don't know if there's an obvious solution to this. And obviously, an awful lot of advocacy work can be done to try and give teachers who are refugees the opportunity to operate in another country and have their skills that they have acquired in their home country recognised. But yeah, I don't think there's an easy solution, and sometimes teachers can be quite deprofessionalised during this time, which I think is what the question's alluding to. Mm-hmm. And it is a concern, and I wish I could offer a better answer. And I don't want teachers. I don't think it's fair that someone who's a qualified teacher in country X crossing into country Y and then suddenly becoming a para teacher who's on less pay and deprofessionalised, and less and not given the kind of the respect that position is due. So I haven't got a good answer for it. Maybe Charlotte or Mary can dive in, or indeed you do. I don't know. Yeah, it's a tough one. We need to keep grappling with it, and we need to keep pressuring governments to try and recognise teachers wherever possible, and based on the competencies, quite frankly, so they do prove that they're capable.
Right. I've put a post to the ILO UNESCO recommendation for teachers. I think that's quite key, and I would encourage people to have a look at that. I know for myself, it was quite eye-opening when I ran into it years ago, and it does provide a bit of guidance. I believe there has been some work. I actually think Jonathan Penson, I see him on the line, has done some work on these questions as well. And I think this really would be interesting to explore in another blogging type of approach like you worked on before, James. So I think we need to continue to dialogue on this question. I want to move to a very kind of practical point. So Eunice has raised the question, and maybe Mary or Charlotte, you could jump in here. But does the number of hours of instruction for the teacher training pack indicated, does that include practice time? Because it doesn't seem to, she was saying.
Another brilliant question, and yes, it does. So then again, another learning from piloting in particular, we've really tried to factor in as much practice time as possible in each session in the model. So whatever the subject is, we've tried to create situations where the teachers will have plenty of time to practice that. Now, of course, that practice is in the training room context. It's very interactive, and the teachers practicing different strategies with each other. And so that's one of the reasons that the number of hours is quite high, is to accommodate that practice time. But of course, then the practice in the classroom is the next step. But in terms of the training practice time, that is included in the hours provided.
Okay. And then Deborah Dimmitt is telling us, thank you for the excellent information and materials. We've had to see a couple of people have had to step off. Well, thank you guys for joining as long as you could. We have a question here from Sam Yukta asking about the variation in competency levels of children in the classes. And if there is a lot of variation, would teachers be equipped to teach at the right level? I think we're looking a bit at inclusive practices here in this question, but if it does the teacher training pack kind of address that, dealing with variation in competencies?
Sorry, conscious I'm talking a lot. Oh, is that Mary?
Yeah, so I was just going to hop in and say, yes, differentiated learning and how to not only deal with different skills levels among students, but also different age groups, because that is a reality is where we have lots of overage learners and mixed age groups in classes. So we do have a session in both the introductory pack and in the extended training pack to talk about that.
Okay.
Charlotte, did you want to add?
No, that was perfect. We covered both from the kind of point of view of inclusion and from differentiation are both covered.
Great. And we have a comment here from Kate Montgomery thanking us for the seminar. But then she was also curious, and I'm curious too, or what are some of the highlights or what was most interesting or surprising that you learned from the pilots in Kenya and Iraq?
Sorry to talk. I could talk about our time in doing the pilot in Kakuma all day, so I'll try to keep it brief. And the whole process was incredibly inspiring. I think primarily from, and that's down to the teachers we were working with and how much we learned from them in terms of developing the materials. It was amazing experience, and the materials are so much stronger for it, and I'm sure that was the same in the Iraq pilot as well. Our colleagues from IRC. I think for me, something that really stuck with me from Kakuma was how much it impacted the sessions around corporal punishment and classroom management. And I think we had created in the design phase, we'd created what seemed like very interactive sessions. You know, they looked great on paper. But then it was really being in the camp and working with the teachers when we quickly realised that actually the approach we had taken wasn't quite right, and that we really needed to get to the heart of these issues and to really talk to the teachers. And so you'll see from the sessions now that they've been really changed since the beginning to really try and get to that. So it's the session on corporal punishment is very much centred on the teachers talking amongst themselves about what the challenges are and where the practices are coming from, and what might be the reasons for changing that. And then it's very much focused on providing alternatives. So we've done a much more of an emphasis now on alternatives and also positive discipline strategies and classroom management strategies. And I think that as a result of those experiences in Kakuma and working so closely with those dedicated teachers, we were able to make that a really powerful session now when we look at the pack. And a lot of that was due, we were working with a head teacher in Kakuma who was particularly input a lot into that session and made it really powerful. So that was fantastic. And I think in the pilot in Iraq, I myself wasn't there. It's my colleague Kathleen, and she was able to revise the teacher wellbeing piece a lot after the experiences there, and that I think as well really benefited from that. But I'm sure I would be happy to talk more about my experiences if anyone wants to get in touch, and I'm sure Kathleen would from the piloting. But it was really invaluable lessons learned.
Great. We have just a question on cost. How much does this training cost?
A great question. I'm hoping Mary can jump in.
Yes. Well, I think it's really up to the agency who does it. I mean, the materials are free. I think each agency has a different policy about, you know, I think some agencies might offer an incentive for teachers to come. Others, you know, will be offering refreshments, you know, maybe covering transportation fee. But I think it's really up to the agency to decide. You know, but the whole idea is that actually, you know, there's no cost for any of the materials, and any other cost is really up to you. Charlotte, James, sorry. No.
No, I'm not sure much more to add. I mean, they're freely available, and then in terms of implementation, as Mary says, I think it depends on the organisation.
Yeah, I mean, everybody, you know, you should know, I mean, all of INEE's tools and resources are free and downloadable, so please go to the website. All of this material that we're sharing today is available, and as we mentioned, we hope to have it in multiple languages soon with your support. But yeah, I mean, you can definitely download and print, you know, at your location. We don't have hard copies available of the tools resources mentioned here. They're all online, but you know, you can access them that way. I do have a question on the subject knowledge, that it's not actually included. Is there's some plans in the future to do so, Mary or Charlotte?
Yeah, you can see that it's in the wheel that we presented, but it's not actually something that we feel we can move forward on as an international, you know, interagency working group, because that's so context specific. That really does need to be matched to the, you know, specific curriculum of that country. So we hope that that can be developed, by, different agencies within each context, but it's not something we felt we can do at an international level. But we did include that in the wheel to really, and a competency, because we know how critical and important that is.
Great.
I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
Right. Well, we're coming close to the end. I think we've captured a number of questions. Eunice has raised a question around, in general, the need for alternative classroom management strategies that are effective for large classes. I was just thinking of the UNESCO guide for teachers on managing large classes, but is there anything in specific that comes up, Mary or Charlotte, from the development of that part of the teacher pack?
Yeah, I think the UNESCO materials are great and actually really inspirational for us, I think, as we were designing the modules. We do quite a lot about redirecting behaviour, and just from my experiences in Kuma, that was, the teachers really appreciated that session, and it was just trying to think about the large class sizes in a slightly different way, and kind of that's the more preventative approach to classroom management. And so there's a 5 top sort of list. We have a star, the 5 tips or 5 elements of classroom management, and a big piece of that is about redirecting behaviour, so strategies around getting students' attention and moving around the room, just as a few examples. But I think that was one of the sessions that the teachers have, in different contexts, have really taken to. And then we did a lot of work with the teachers in the different settings in coming up with strategies amongst together as well, and there's guidance around that in the training, which is hopefully useful. But yeah, all of the strategies in the training are very much aimed at classes that are of a really large size, because we're conscious that that is the likely setting. I think Mary wants to jump in and add something. No?
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize, I think this is it's a great question, and I'm just reflecting on James's point at the beginning of this session today, where we talked about how training really does need to be complemented with ongoing coaching and mentoring. And so I just want to use this as a plug for, as we move forward, looking at developing the coaching curriculum, and here in Casa we're also piloting it's a separate initiative, a mentoring initiative. And what's come up, as we develop that, is this issue again around classroom management and how to handle large class sizes. So even though, I think there's been some great work in this training about how to deal with those issues and really hands-on practical opportunities to address that, we see that it keeps coming up in other forums and in the coaching, for example. So I would just like to emphasize the importance of having that ongoing support after the training.
Great. Well, we've come now really close to the end, and I just wanted to give all 3 of our speakers the final word. James, is there anything you'd like to leave our audience with before we close?
So just to say thank you, really. It's really kind of everyone, and to kind of join in and ask so many thoughtful questions and join in with such an important debate on such an important issue. So just to say thank you, really, to everyone, and really also to encourage a community of practice. There are quite a lot of communities of practice around teachers, but we've just got a long way to go, and the evidence on what really works is slim for teaching. So let's build a community, let's share resources freely and without too much worry, because I think by sharing resources, sharing experience, building evidence, talking lots, I think we will take this sector forward quite quickly, because it needs to be taken forward.
Great, great. Charlotte, would you like to close with something?
Yeah, sure. Just to echo James' thanks to you, Dean, and INEE, and to everyone on the webinar. And also just to say I think it's been really exciting to be part of this, because it's been such a collaborative effort and such an interagency one. And so just to say to everyone on the call, we really would love to hear from you. So if there are further questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And if you'd like to hear more about the working group's activities, again, do reach out, because, yeah, as I say, the more we can learn from each other, the better. So thanks for everybody.
Great. And Mary?
Yeah, just again, a huge thank you to everybody today on the call and to INEE and to the working group. I have to say it's been such an incredible privilege to be working alongside such incredible, passionate and talented individuals, and it's so exciting to be at this stage where people are now starting to use it. So I look forward to seeing the blogs coming up about how people are using it, and hopefully even more agencies will contribute to that series. So thanks everybody for taking your time today.
Yes. Now, just to remind people, if you have additional questions or would like to provide some input on this topic, please send an email to tpd@ineesite.org. I think there's a couple questions we might have missed, so we'll try to pull those together and share those with the presenters. But yes, thank you everyone for joining. It looks like we had over 80 people online at one point, so that's quite exciting. And, you know, this to me is a perfect example of all that INEE can achieve, and that's because members like James, Mary, Charlotte, Mary Burns, Mary Mendenhall, I'm just thinking there's so many members who've been working on all of these important resources, and thanks to them and their hard work, we have these tools and resources to share with the wider community. So we look forward to talking with all of you again, and please stay tuned for the next webinar. We hope to have more information for you in the near future. Thank you.